Well, very good evening, friends. This Saturday, 5 p.m. live and breaking. And let's begin with an important development coming in. Reports suggest that there have been almost 60,000 COVID-related deaths in China to people who had COVID-19 since early December, following plus, and the official toll stood at 5,272 on January 8. The Chinese government stopped reporting data on COVID-19 infections long time back. Let's go to Ankita Prasad. He's getting us more details, joining us from our newsroom in Mumbai. Ankita, international reports, but obviously quoting official sources, which means the official death count of China really doubles. Ultimately, the communist state coming out with some facts. So you think that these numbers are believable, or there could be more truth still to come out?
I mean, two elements to your question, Abhishek. One is the past numbers were never believable because when COVID had broken out in 2020, China had somewhere capped the number of deaths that had taken place to 3,000 and total number of cases to 70,000. And that was all the way back in 2020. So since then, they claim that it only rose by another 2,500. And now they're saying since early December, another 5,500 people have passed away. This, when you juxtapose with the earlier report, where in a rare admission by a government agency, it had disclosed that some 37 million people may have been infected with COVID on just a single day, the numbers somehow in their scaling don't seem to add up. But this is nonetheless a rare piece of information that has been put out by China. Remember, there has been a lot of back and forth between China and the WHO as well, because after what we witnessed last month, with hospital beds overflowing, with patients on the streets, with a lot of people clearly struggling with China zero COVID not working, they had been asked to publish data, and now at least in that way they have.
Yeah, Ankit, hold on to your thoughts. I'm told that China expert Andrew Liu is joining us over the phone from Hong Kong. Welcome, Mr. Liu. And if you can, we are getting these reports coming out of Beijing and quoting official sources suggesting that as many as 60,000 people might have died in China due to COVID or COVID-related ailments. You think this is really going to change the picture drastically insofar as how the world sees China's COVID management post the lifting of the zero COVID policy, Mr. Liu?
Well, I think that there are various definitions of COVID deaths. But so far, until China dropped the dynamic zero COVID policy about a couple of weeks ago, the definition of COVID death was largely accepted, the same as the used by other countries. And the deaths, the number of deaths have been recorded by Johns Hopkins University in the United States. Of course, Johns Hopkins is a renowned university worldwide, and they do not accept just data just fed to them by any country. But according to Johns Hopkins website as of 31st of December, looking at the mortality rates around the world, both China and India and Japan rank very low in the league table. Per 100,000 population, for example, infection has been spreading very, very rapidly. According to Shanghai, I think it's Shanghai University or some other institutions in Shanghai, as many as 9 billion people in China have been affected. Don't forget that China is 1.4 9 billion, 900 million. China's population, of course, is 1.4 billion.
Right.
And so 900 million is about 60 or 70%. Now,
Mr. Liu,
infected doesn't mean that they all die. The death rate is you quote a figure of
Mr. Liu,
it's nothing compared.
We really wish China well. Nobody wants these many deaths. But we were trying to understand the implications here and what this really means for the Chinese communist state and the Communist Party. Joining me, Madhav Nalapat, a geopolitical strategist, a known name, a close observer of geopolitical developments. Welcome, Mr. Nalapat. If I could, ask from where Mr. Leung left. the Chinese perhaps did not prepare, Mr. Leung was mentioning, as well as they should have before lifting the zero COVID policy. But the implications are serious, not just for the Chinese, but for the rest of the world, in terms of both the spread of COVID and the cascading effect it might have on the still fragile economic recovery.
Yeah, hello. Yes.
I'm getting you, Mr. Professor Nalapat. I'm getting you. If you've got my question.
I
repeat?
want to say very clearly that the Chinese people would be better served if the Xi regime were more transparent. You had SARS-1, and very quickly the regime changed from opacity to transparency, and as a consequence, SARS-1 failed to become a pandemic. The infection was limited to a few locations. Fortunately, India almost entirely escaped. SARS-2, which is COVID-19, has become a horrible pandemic, killing so many millions of people, including I'm sorry to say, in China, as a consequence of the complete lack of transparency. So from the very beginning, we needed to know about this particular problem. Doctors in China, patriotic individuals, brilliant individuals, Chinese are among the smartest people on the planet. They had known all about this. They gave warnings as early, from my reading, as early definitively as November. And those warnings were not heeded. And by January 10th or so, it was clear what was happening. But the Chinese state did nothing, ignored it, with the result that by March, you had this horrible pandemic that spread across the whole world. And most astonishingly, the Chinese state allowed flights to go from China across to the whole world when they knew that many of the passengers are carrying this virus. And today, the same thing is happening. You've got flights going across the world from China, and a lot of the passengers, unfortunately, regrettably, are infected.
Right. Mr. Leung, if you're still there, and if you could, I could, bring what the thoughts of Professor Nalapat to you. You also mentioned that the Chinese state perhaps you qualified, did not prepare well. But it seems, as Professor Nalapat believes, that the Chinese were not very transparent and forthright, and maybe they are doing this only because of global pressure. And two, because they did not prepare well, it's going to have consequences for the rest of the world all over again.
Well, I think to be fair, of course, China, right at the beginning of the pandemic, it was a completely new virus, and the entire world wasn't prepared about this pandemic at all, including the nature of the virus. So, and of course, the political system in China is quite different. So, at the beginning, there was a bit of hiccup, but very soon, the pandemic started. I think it was in late 2019. I think it's 2019, and then just 1 month later, in January 2020. China just shared the sequence of the virus sequence with international institutions. So very, very early. But then the sharing of the data wasn't taken very seriously, not least by the United States, under President Trump. So China has been sharing the data with the WHO. But of course, the whole world was just trying to blame China on all sorts of things. But then if you look at the Johns Hopkins University website comparing mortality with...
Moving on.